Good afternoon and welcome to our community education series. Tonight, we're going to have a presentation on how to make a healthy lifestyle work for you. I would like to introduce our speaker, who is Jessica Jalot Collier. Jessica works at our Guthrie campus. She works for Guthrie Healthcare. She's the coordinator of obesity medicine. And in her role, she provides sports nutrition counseling and consultation. She provides nutrition and exercise instruction, guidance and coaching for both medical and surgical patients. So just listening to her everyday work will give you an idea of how qualified she is to present this program this evening. She is also a fitness specialist and exercise physiologist for the bariatric surgery and bariatric medicine group up at Guthrie. And she is a wife, mother, daughter, and happens to be an instructor here at the college as well. So Jessica is a locally trained woman. She went to the University of Scranton for her undergrad. She went to Marywood for her graduate degree. And she went to Northeast College of Health Sciences to get her master's in clinical nutrition. So please join me in welcoming Jessica.
So thanks for having me, guys. I'm hoping everybody's going to take some great tips from here. So here's where this kind of came about, how to make a healthy lifestyle. So I'm always asked to talk about nutrition, exercise, what's the keys in obesity medicine right now, sports nutrition. But I think there's something bigger. Instead of what's the new tip, what's the new special trick, it really goes back to basics. So I'm hoping by kind of taking all these things we see, especially on social media, and making it simple again, we can actually get somewhere. And this is what I spend all day doing. So my objectives today. So discuss some current trends we see in the healthy living space, because these are the things we fall victim to and we're always targeted all the time. They also get in the way, I think, of actually creating these sustainable lifestyle habits. So I want people hopefully to be able to come up with finding a new maintainable way to make lasting changes. And that's the thing, we're always looking, how do we improve or maintain health? Because as we all know, it's never a final destination. We don't ever get somewhere and we get to stop trying. And as we keep going through different life cycles, as our lives keep changing, so do our goals. So instead of looking for this one size fits all, how do we find some ways that we can continue to grow and be healthier? Like I said, learn to set realistic goals around how do we improve health, because we can always improve health, right? There's always these targets we're working on. And then how do you identify resources in your community, whether for yourself or if there's other providers in the room? How do you also start to make some of these partnerships with key stakeholders? Because that's what makes the difference in how we provide care. So some current trends. I want to go over these because as someone who works in obesity medicine all the time, these are the things people are coming in saying, hey, I've tried this. Why isn't this working? Jessica, what do you think? And we're constantly targeted. So let's be honest, if you're on social media, these things are constantly popping up, okay? I call them restrictive diets, right? They're very prescribed. The three I listed are kind of the ones we do commonly see a lot. So things like OptiFast, Herbalife. If I have one more rep reach out trying to sell me stuff, I rip my hair out. And I'm like, no, I'm not interested. And then they keep pressing, and then it's a pretty uncomfortable conversation for a point. Now there are pros with it. You can't screw it up. Okay, so like OptiFast, they literally tell you 4 to 5 feedings. Okay, where do you see what you get fed? But feedings, and then this lean and green meal. So people, it is easy for people because it takes the, what do I have to plan? What do I have to cook? What do I have to eat? It makes it simple. And let's be honest, people, it is very overwhelming to eat healthy. It's really not hard, but until you figure it out, it seems very overwhelming. So it makes it easy. And let's be honest, when you see the advertisement, like lose 50 pounds in like 2 months, man, I'm into it. Okay. I'm thinking, well, maybe we should give it a shot. So, but the easy part of it is it does tend to be structured, which people like. They like it's very simple. I line my things up, I take them in a day, and then I have to make one meal. But here's where the cons are. Very limited variety. If anybody's ever tried these, I mean, you're eating the same food over and over again. And we do utilize some very low calorie diets or VLCDs within our clinic. We don't do them very often because realistically, they don't last long. But if you want to drink the same shake for 5 weeks or 5 months, how long are you going to be able to do that? So people burn out, and then we're back to the drawing board again. typically very costly, okay? A lot of times, like I looked at the Herbalife because we were getting a bunch of it at one point. And it's just your kind of typical protein shake and then there's some aloe vera drink, which aloe vera is dirt cheap. The cost of it, I was like, well, this is crazy. I buy premium protein products and I'm spending less money. So this is a lot. So people I'm like, I always tell people, if you can't afford to do it more in a couple of weeks, what's your long-term plan? So it's very costly. And oh, by the way, if you have a family, so I have 2 children and a husband that still need to eat in the house. If I'm just doing this, I still have to feed my family. So the cost does become prohibitive for people. I always say you don't learn coping and planning skills. So a lot of times they'll run out and they're like, oh, I didn't bring the eating things. My bars and the shakes. It's like, okay, well, what are you gonna do? I don't know what I can have. So we didn't actually teach you anything. And that's my whole goal is how do we teach you to eat healthy? It's like that whole fish thing, right? You teach them to fish, they fish forever versus we give you a fish. So how do we teach people? And when you're at this very structured, restricted program, we didn't teach anything, right? But the people selling you, they did get something. And it's like I said, it's not conducive to families because obviously you're not feeding your kids 5 protein shakes and some green meal or some of these frozen meals. So how do we get past this? So another restrictive diet, right? Keto's made a big kick again. Atkins was big when I was in school and then it circled back again. But it's still restricting something. Now, when I was in college, and it's been a hot minute, guys. Low fat, like don't let me kid, it's been a good 20 years. Low fat was the rage, right? Everything was fat free, and that's when that Oleans came out. And everybody remember that? They put that in your chips with the caution that you might have some issues in your pants. Low fat was an issue. Okay, now lower fat, cut calories. Problem solved, we lost weight. Keto, Atkins. So now can talk about complete opposite, right? Keto is like these people are eating fat pounds. I don't know how if you were on gallbladder, but it's gonna get interesting too. But they're very restrictive because now we're cutting things out. So now we cut all the carbs out, right? Can it be very beneficial? Yes, there are pros and cons. Pros for especially very like keto diets and very, very low carb diets, we know for epileptic people, they are actually really great. Okay. We know low fat, if you're having gallbladder issues, they do drop your fat, right? So these things can be used for certain people in certain populations. But just to say, hey, I'm gonna go keto, or I'm gonna cut all the fat out of my diet for nothing other than losing weight and trying to be healthy, not gonna work. I always get worried too when some of my young girls go too low fat because we know fat's a precursor for hormones. So it's funny, so I'm in the target population now being in my 40s for this perimenopause stuff. And I won't lie, I've been doing research too because it's coming around, so I want to be informed. But it's amazing how many things are being sold at us for that, right? So this is the same kind of things. So now will you see weight loss with these restrictive diets? Yeah, and we know that. So people come in, they're like, hey Jess, you know what? I lost about 40 pounds on keto. I felt great. And my next statement is always, what happened? Why didn't stick with it? Okay. So all diets work, but what could you stick with? And they're like, okay, well, I think I'll do it again. I'm like, but we just had the conversation, it doesn't work. Okay. And back to the cons, high rate of burnout. I'm Italian and Slovakian. Okay. We eat pasta. I love homemade pierogies. I don't like the cook cabbage stuff, so you can keep that. But like, how do I celebrate Christmas at my house on a keto diet? Actually, my parents would probably just tell you to stay home. They're not even entertaining this idea. Okay. So how do you teach your family this too? And raising 2 children, I want them to understand nutrition, but I don't want them to be like, oh, mom can't have any carbs today. I don't want them to have fat. So it's not great for families. It can cause other risks that we have, right? We know some of these very high fat diets have been filled with a lot of saturated fats. Now we're seeing cardiovascular risk factors. If we're taking no fiber, the GI people aren't loving that either. So all these things that are very restrictive, we run the risk of at the expense of just losing weight. Okay. Intermittent fasting. I wanted to talk about this one. This is also what I call another trend. This was huge. It's starting to die down a little bit, thank God. Does it work? Yes. But it works because if all of a sudden you're eating 14 hours a day and now you eat 6, what happened? Well, we cut calories. You stop eating so much. And like I tell people, you do need to fast in the day, right? If you're up eating 24 hours a day, we have a problem. Your body does need to fast and regenerate cells. We know this, but there's no magic to intermittent fasting. And what a lot of people are finding out, especially women, all the studies, surprise, surprise, are done on men. So women actually start to have some hormone issues. So they're finding it's not as great. Could it be okay for some people? Yes. We actually started, one of our APPs ran a study this year using our Muslim population around Ramadan because you figure we knew they would stick to their fast. right? Because the hard part is how do you get people to stick to something? We knew that culturally, they really were gonna stick to their designated fast. And what we found was there really wasn't much weight loss, because it still matters at the end of the day, what do you eat in the window? I had this one young girl come in, and she goes, I don't understand, I'm doing all the right thing, I cut my window to 6 hours, I'm like, okay, but you're going dumb, like we're eating a lot of junk in 6 hours. She's like, yeah, but they told me 6 hours and I'm gonna be okay. I'm like, well, we're not. So like, we still have to look at what are we eating. For some people, is this a great way to help control calories? Yeah. Like I said, if you're up raising at midnight and now all of a sudden I took that midnight feast out, we'll lose weight. Like I said, can it be beneficial? Yes, we know some people who struggle with some insulin sensitivity issues. It can be helpful, but it's not the miracle that it's supposed to be. You still have to be mindful of intake. What we noticed too is muscle loss, because even what you're taking in that window, if we're not getting enough protein or if we've over restricted calories, now we've dropped your muscle. So now really we didn't make you any healthier. I'm like the muscle monitor at work, by the way. Hypoglycemia. If you're someone like me, and these people are fasting 24, 48 hours, you won't be around me, I'm not gonna feel good. I can't even cut my carbs that low without feeling like garbage. So now people don't feel good. Burnout, and it goes back to the same thing with the families, is if my family eats dinner at 6:30, let's call it what it is, we're eating at 7:30 with soccer and everything else. If my window ended at 6 o'clock though, so now I'm sitting down to a family with young kids and I'm not eating. So it's not great for developing healthy behaviors within a family. And it's also very isolating. If all of a sudden you're the one who, well, mom's just gonna drink water all day. I don't think it's a great approach. So what are some last couple things before we move? What are we gonna do? These have been the big things lately. Well, it's just, and this was forever, especially when I started school. Calories in versus out. Eat less, move more. That really doesn't work. Does it work a little bit? Yes, we do know you have to burn more than you're taking in, but it's not that simple. Because if all of a sudden you start exercising a lot more and we're not taking in what you need, you're actually breaking down your muscle. So now your body fat percentage is higher. Once again, we didn't do anything. Just eat less. Well, that's easy. At first, just eating less will work for some people. So say you go kind of the extreme. I go to McDonald's 3 times a day, and I'm just gonna eat half my meal. Will they lose weight? Yeah, right? We took in half the calories we used to. But at a certain point, it's gonna start to matter what are we taking in, and then how is that actually affecting our health? So just eating smaller portions doesn't necessarily work, because if you're not getting the right things in, we just eat less, we actually didn't improve your health at all. Walking is an exercise. I just heard this recently. This has been a new, I don't know if I get all the trends for this stuff. I actually felt my heart start. I was like, I am very easily provocable for certain things, and this was one. I'm like, well, wait a second, we use this for cardiac rehab. We use this as one of the forms of exercise for everything. How is walking not exercise, right? And they're saying you had to do more. Do you have to do more than walking? Yes, if you want certain outcomes, but walking is one of the best things we can do. We take your whole weight, we move you through gravity. Walking's great, right? And it's one of the safest forms of exercise that we have. Talking about supplements and being the target, adrenal fatigue and cortisol imbalance. If I had a buck for everybody coming in, it's starting to die down because I think they know we're not doing it in our office. My cortisol's high. And that one APP I work with, her and I have very similar personalities. She's like, okay, well, if I run this and it comes back high, what are we gonna do with it? Wasn't there a pill? She's like, well, no, if you have a true cortisol issue, you're going endocrinology, and it's not as common as you think. She's like, you're telling me you just are super stressed, et cetera, your cortisol is gonna be high. But everybody's trying to sell us these supplements for adrenal fatigue, and these conditions actually do exist. But as most people realize, in very small amounts, and we don't see them as often. But if you get on social media, we're all struggling with this. And then, like I said, the target of perimenopause, menopause, gut health, there are things that we really do need to improve on, right? But there's no one size fits all for it. And that's kind of what I'm trying to get at. There's no one size fits all. There's no one supplement, one pill, one recommendation that takes care of all of this. And that's what we're targeted as. I always tell people when it comes to eating healthy, improving health, if someone promises you some miracle, just go the other way, because they're going to sell you something and it's never going to work. So where does this leave us? Are we more confused? Hopefully not. We're going to get back to the basics. And what I want to do is talk about tips and tricks for eating healthy for all needs and tastes. Obviously, we're not getting individual because everybody's different, right? And so those are where we see individual visits. And we're going to touch base on physical activity and exercise, and then my overall healthy living tips. So getting back to basics, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time here because we're not going to do a whole nutrition course. But the 3 basic things, because you're going to get tired of me talking about, is protein, carbs, and fats. Okay, and you see there's still a lot of overlap, right? So when this is where people get really confused is you do have things that are strictly like a protein, right? Your meats, there's no carbs in them unless you're on processed, separate issue. Your fats, some of them have absolutely nothing else in them but fat, right? So those are the things where people get confused is the gray zone, right? Like, oh, beans. Beans are good for me, yes, but they give us a certain amount of carbs. And this is where when we're thinking, when people are eating a little differently and ethnic different bases, how do we make sure they're getting what they need while still being mindful of what they're considering mostly their protein sources? So my favorite thing, protein. I spend more time talking about protein in a given day, actually our whole department does, than I would ever thought I was going to. But this is one of the things most people undereat, and it's one of the things we can change the most. Now, we've also gotten crazy. One of my patients came in, young girl in college, there was this protein popcorn. I'm like, okay, well, how do you turn popcorn into protein? It's dusted with white powder. Okay. But we've gotten a little far that everything now has protein. And the best part is I love some of the stuff where it's like, now it's protein, good source, and there's 3 grams. That's not a good source of protein. Okay. But everything have we not noticed, everything's got protein in it right now. Like you see it across the top of everything. So, but we do need it, and I will say most people still undereat it. Unfortunately, one of the trends I've been seeing, especially in some of the dietitian groups, has been that people are getting enough protein and are overeating it. I will be honest, seeing even myself, and I see a significant, right now I'm seeing a little more patients than I'm supposed to. Seeing at least 100 patients a week, I can tell you the bulk of them are not getting enough protein. And this is working individually with them, calculating their needs. And these aren't sports nutrition, this is just basic obesity medicine, are not getting nearly the amount of protein they need. And I think too, we were always so afraid of it in the past. Like my parents have come to me all the time. And my mom would be like, oh, I'm getting my protein. I'm like, and I'll calculate it out. She's like, that's how much. And I'm like, Mom, that's like the low end. And she's like, I don't know, it seems high. I'm like, it's not. But we've been so programmed to think what's high and what's not. So why do we need it though? And this is why I preach about it so much. This is what will increase and maintain lean body mass, right? Because it's the building blocks of muscle. Here's the other big kicker. It balances blood sugars. So we know for a lot of people in the typical American diet, carbs are too high, right? But it's not just how can we cut the carbs to 0, it's how do we balance the carbs? And that's where protein comes in. We know it helps with bone density. So we do talk about menopause, perimenopause. Any people, especially our patients who've had surgery or on our GLP-1 meds who are losing a lot of weight, we worry about their bone density. So we want to make sure they're getting enough protein and exercise, which will go over, but getting enough protein, getting enough calories to maintain their bone density. And you need the protein to do that, okay? Repairing, healing, okay? Like I said, I am part of the surgery program too, so we know we need that to heal. But I tell people all the time, I'm like, it's useful in any field we're in, right? If we have bumps, if you're having surgery, if you broke bones, you need the protein to heal, okay? And then healthy skin, hair, and all the fun stuff too. Where do we find protein? Beef, poultry, pork, fish and seafood, eggs and egg whites, dairy products, soy. I'm not the biggest soy fan, but that's just my personal thing. Then things like beans that you have, and then supplements. So there are a lot of great supplements out there that we can utilize to help increase our protein needs, okay? Now, I don't, like, once in a while we get patients, not once in a while, we get a little more, not once in a while. We'll come in and they want to just do only protein shakes, because they're like, well, it's easier than eating meat. And it's like, but it's still back to the variety of where we get our nutrition from. And there are a lot of great protein shakes and stuff out there. I do utilize them at my own house, but we don't want this one size kind of fits all. We'll go into more details. So the carbs, and like I said, this was back to like the keto and like everything's lower carb. Most people do need to go a little lower carb than what they're eating. Just kind of a blanket statement, but most are overeating carbs. But we do need them. And this is where when everybody's like, I'm just gonna stop eating them. Some people feel great like that. I have never felt great dropping my carbs that low, but you may try. It's our primary source of energy. So my athletes, I do put them significantly higher. And that's the one tough part sometimes in my job is working with obesity and athletes. And because you're trying to always find the balance. And I body comp both people. So we use bioelectric impedance scales. So I know exactly how much muscle you have, body fat, bone. I know your breast and metabolic rate. So I know exactly how to feed you, how much excess body fat you have, if you're in a deficit of muscle. So sometimes it's like this fine balance of trying to feed the activity, but also make sure we don't bring your body fat up. But the carbs, we need them for those sources of energy. But a lot of people are just getting way too many carbs without that protein to balance it. We know it helps gut health, we know blood sugar regulation, but where is it coming from? And like I said, what happens with some people is all of a sudden they'll go and cut it all the way out and then they don't feel good. So I don't believe in all or nothing. But I do believe in getting carbs from better places. I don't believe that we should be getting them constantly from junk food, right? Like fruits, beans, starchy vegetables, grains, legumes, all your bread, cereals, and pastas, we can still eat them, but it's watching how much of them we are. And then also too, remembering, like everybody comes in there like, well, Jess, did you know there's carbs in the Greek yogurt? Yep, and milk will have it too. I'm like, lactose, your milk sugars are always gonna have to like, so I can't find any sugar-free Greek yogurt. Like, no, please don't. If you do, I don't know what you're gonna eat. Fat, like I said, I'm a big fan of healthy fats. This is also one of the spots for my athletes. This is where I can get enough calories in them without the, because a lot of times, some of them, depending on their needs, their calorie needs are high. And they're like, I can't eat anymore. Also too, this is what we use a lot with our people on GLP-1s. If we're getting their protein in, we're keeping the carbs a little lower, but we still need them to get enough calories, but they feel so restricted. Using healthy fats is a great way to get the calories in without taking up a ton of space. There's where it goes two ways though, right? Is for some people, for overeating fat, the calories are sky high, right? And because it's very calorie dense. But for some people, and we use this a lot, like Dr. Warrington and myself, a lot of times when we're talking to patients who, like I said, are on these GLP-1s and they're greatly restricted, it's a great way to bring the calories up a little bit for them when they feel like they can't eat anymore. So, but we also need fat. Like I said, when I was in college and all of a sudden this whole fat-free thing came through, it wasn't great. Fat does give us concentrated energy. Like I said, that's why I use it with some of my athletes, depending on when they're taking it throughout the day. But I can boost their calories up without them feeling sick. It also helps us absorb fat-soluble vitamins. And like I said, this is important too in patients who are taking in smaller amounts of food like ours, because we want to make sure they're also getting all their vitamins. We know it's a building block of hormone. So amazing, when women actually eat the right amount of fat, they actually feel better, which is a win-win. And then it is important for heart health. And you're like, wait a minute, some of the cardiologists are gonna have a heart attack. But the right kinds of fats in the right amount are very healthy for our heart, right? Because then what's happening with some of these fat-free products, we're driving up the sugar and stuff, we're actually causing other cardiovascular issues. And then satiety, let's be honest, when you add a little bit of fat to things, they taste better. Anybody ever eat fat-free cheese? It's not good, right? You add a little fat to it, all of a sudden our food tastes better. Because I'm also a fan of like, when we're trying to eat better and feel better, the food has to taste good, okay? I don't believe in just eating bland food because that's never gonna last. And then where do we find our fats? So oils, butters, animal protein. So if you're eating steak and red meat, we're going to find it. Now that's where, like I said, it's watching the right kind of amounts and quantities. So we don't want these sky high amounts of saturated fats. Avocados, which I love, it's a give and take for people. Nuts, but nuts and seeds are a great example of balancing. They have carbs, protein, and fat. So they're not a true just fat. And then your nut butters and cheese, okay? So there's our basic macronutrients, right? What do we need to eat? So here's where I'm gonna make it easy, right? Instead of like the restrictive diets like I talked about before, these are my favorite two methods, this one and then the one coming up, of how I teach people to eat without exact macro measurements. And usually, like I said, when we see people one-on-one, I do calculate and give you exactly roughly how much protein do I want, how many carbs, how many calories, but that's individual. Here's one thing, either for yourself, if for a patient, for anybody you're talking to, if you give them this rough idea, they will fall in a very great spot, okay? Because in a smaller plate, not like, you know, big plate. But then you get a balanced meal. Why do I say this? The first thing we tell people, quarter your plate protein, okay? If you get at least a quarter of your plate protein, we know that we're at least getting a decent amount, okay? And then without giving exact measurements, we always tell people at least 20, and it's a range. Most people are gonna need anywhere from about 20 to 45 grams of meat, okay? And more factors go into it, but in the back of your head. And really, when you think about that, people are like, oh my God, how much am I eating? Every 1 ounce of protein or every 1 ounce of like meat will give you like 7 grams of protein. So you're talking 4 ounces. If anybody else goes out to eat, well, who gets a 4? They don't even sell a 4-ounce steak, right? It's usually 6 ounces. You're 40 grams of protein. So when people tell me, Joss, I just can't eat that much, I'm like, well, we can, right? But every single meal, breakfast included, because that's what people struggle, we want to make sure we're putting protein first. Also, too, this works great for our patients, especially our diabetic patients or insulin resistant patients, all of those, because we can balance the carbs. So we want to keep, and what I always tell people is about a quarter of your plate carbs. Ideally, I always like a little less carbs than protein, right? But we're getting carbs. I didn't say no, right? We get some. But you realize how much less, because most people are going to fill that whole spot with carbs. Now, this does have some fruit up there. I put fruit down here. You're just not going to find a lot of pictures that way. And then the big thing is, how do we get people to eat more vegetables? But if you think of this plate not only as a plate, but your stomach, now I got protein in you, right? I'm gonna balance your blood sugars, I'm gonna keep you full, and I'm gonna support your muscle. You do get some carbs, so we have a good source of energy. And now we added all this fiber and all what I call micronutrients, right? Your vitamins, your minerals, all the bulk too. Because this is also where we get full and we feel full, it helps people. But here's where we can really push and get good nutrition. And that's why I said, if you teach people the plate method, where's your protein, where's your carbs, where's all your veggies, and like a thumb of fat, right? Now we're in a good spot. And if people can take that one tip and think, how do I do that? And it helps too with everything we do, right? Like I said, I was raised Italian. We eat a lot of pasta. I'm not giving up pasta ever. But I eat it in a smaller amount. And when I eat pasta, instead of like just big, I could probably eat the box if I wanted to. But instead of doing that, I have pasta. I fill it with a ton of protein. I add a ton of veggies to it. So now I usually do, I like putting things in big bowls, mix them all together. So now I have this big bowl of food, but the carbs are very balanced versus what would we usually do? Huge bowl of pasta, bread, right? And maybe we had a salad. So that's where now you can eat a lot of the same things you like, but how do we tweak it, right? We see a lot of different ethnicities up where we're at. So like say a lot of times people are doing a lot of, beans and rice and stuff. You can add them, but they're both gonna sit here instead of beans and rice and maybe some protein. Yes, you're gonna get a little bit of protein from the beans, but not enough to support you. So you can still have those things, but where can we pick up some veggies that you like? Where can we pick up that protein? So all the meals that we typically like, we can tweak them and rebalance. And most of my day, a lot of my day, is looking with patients through food records and saying, okay, this is something you guys like a lot in your house. How can we take this meal that you and your family enjoy and how do we just tweak it? So that we increase a couple things, decrease, but the meal looks the same. And now all of a sudden, we didn't really cut that much out, we just rebalanced it, right? This also goes to the handful method. It's one of my favorite things, because obviously if you're out in public, right? Please don't take a scale. I mean, that's your own business, but I'm not. I use food scale at my house because I want to make sure I'm getting what we need. And my kids know, like I'm like, oh, I want to make sure you're getting enough protein. I want to make sure, you know what I mean? So there's no like crazy food stuff in our house. But I do want to I also love to eat everybody, so it's a little bit of being a little mindful too. But here's the handful method. If you look at your patient, and this is something too, like any field you're in, and like a lot of times people say to us, how do we talk to our patients about eating healthy? What's the quickest way? Most people don't have any time to do it, right? But 2 minutes, this one works quick. Palm's worth of protein, right? At least your palm size. Here's the best gift we have. For the most part, and obviously there's abnormalities, we get that. Most people are born with the hand they need to feed them, okay? So I'm like 5'5". My husband's 6'4", okay? He has bigger hands than I do. I try to eat like off his skin size, but it doesn't go so. And if I feed him off mine, the man's gonna starve, right? So we're given the hand we need. So tell your patient or yourself, like, and it's great when you're out, so you just kind of eyeball, right? Like, do I have at least my palm's worth of protein? Okay. I would say like a small fist of carbs, so we still get them. And then it says a fist of veggies, 2 for men. Let me be honest with you, I will never count veggies. You will never see me measure lettuce, count green beans. I would say at least a handful, the more the merrier, okay? But this is a great way to talk to people about nutrition because now it's balanced. They got their protein, they got their carbs, and we get them to eat veggies. Honestly, if you can get anybody to eat veggies, we're already winning. Take out everything else at this point, okay? So why are these maintainable and helpful? Like I said, it can fit all of our favorite meals. And I'm not talking fast food and some of that stuff, but we can negotiate. But like anything you eat, like pierogies. Oh, so Christmas Eve in our house, since we are Catholic, my mom's probably like, you don't go to church, but that's a set. I still don't do, we still do a meat-free Christmas Eve. So we always do homemade pierogies. I do a wreath, by the way, but I do get some balance, I'll tell you in a minute. We do salmon, and then there's always a big salad. Okay, so now what did that look like? I still got my pierogies. I do go a little over the quarterly plate. I'm not gonna sit and lie to anybody. But on a good day, if you did them, you have a couple of pierogies, right? So there's your carb. We have salmon, so I got my protein and my fat, and then we always have salad, right? So there's a huge half your plate of vegetables. So now you took a meal that we already ate and we balanced it. I could eat a trough of pierogies, but I am not gonna feel good later on that night, right? Then the next night, usually Christmas Day is always hard. We usually do homemade manicotti or something like that, so the pasta, dough wrap, meat filled. But we always have meatballs as well, so extra protein. We always have another salad. So some people in the house are not the biggest veggie eaters, but salad everybody will eat. So there's always some kind of vegetables, there's always a protein, and we're balancing the carbs. So you're still getting them, but in different amounts. My daughter's on a taco kick right now. If anybody, daughter eats like 5 things right now, it's painful. She loves protein, thank God. So like the great way I can balance it is, she'll take the corn tortillas and I'll put some cheese so she gets some fat, and then she'll get protein. So a little lower carb, guy, not out of choice per se, but she likes corn. She's getting really upset right now because the farmers are done growing corn for their. But it's a great way for me to get protein in her, so she's not just eating carbs and things like that, right? My kids, when you think of like, how do we do this as a family? My kids will always eat the protein that's there, which is great. So they'll take it, like Hazel's eating tacos. Arlo just sometimes eats a bowl of protein because he loves it, the meat, but then he'll do some fruit or something like that. Because my husband and I do always have tons of veggies in the house and carbs. So it's kind of like this way. Everybody in the house is eating similar things, but they're always all getting the big pieces, getting enough protein. And if they won't eat the veggies, I will get them fruit for kids, okay? Like I said, it's culturally sensitive. Take your favorite meals. How do you look at what your family's doing and your traditions? And how do we just retweak it? If we know that we're doing a lot of carbs, and I think a lot of us do, right? And you know, like I said, growing up where I grew up, my mom, we always had protein and there's always a salad, but the carb servings were high. So how do you just look and say, okay, if I'm gonna do this meal, how do I pull back a little bit, like on the potatoes, right? I grew up, my family's kind of the oddball family in town, I guess. It's a huge farming community, so a lot of meat, potatoes, vegetable. And I tell people, I'm like, honestly, that's one of the easiest people you grew up around, right? Make sure you're getting a big enough piece of protein. Let's drop the potatoes a little bit, because you know, everybody loves potatoes. And how do we increase the veggies? So we can take all the things you grew up eating, all the things your family wants to eat, but tweak them so we can get a healthier balance, right? Because we know balanced meals, this is how we can maintain or build lean body mass, okay, which most people, especially women, we need to work on. We can maintain and stabilize blood sugar. So now we know by not necessarily dropping all the carbs, but by better balancing with protein and fiber, we don't get those sharp rise and falls for our patients, right? Our patients with insulin resistance, we know when we're giving them enough protein, we're doing a better job not driving them up and storing that body fat, okay? Without them feeling diet or restrictive. Also too, wide variety of foods. Like I said, when we run right back to the very first thing I talked about, we're not living on a protein bar, not living on a protein shake, we're not eating one food. We're getting a wide variety of food. The more variety of food we can get people to eat, better nutrition. And then also too, now it prioritizes a much more fiber and whole foods, right? And it makes it fit. How do we make a plan? So we talk about healthy living, right? This is something else I spend a lot of my time talking about. Here's the thing that always bothered me, right? For the longest time, I haven't heard it in a while, thank God, is, oh, we all have the same 24 hours in a day. We don't. We all only have 24 hours in a day, unless someone found extra ones, I take a couple. But our days do not look the same. So when someone comes to you and says, well, this is what you need to do, well, does that work in your day? Like I said, I have 2 young children. I know what it's like. One of them's a little bit of a medical nightmare. She's good now, but we've had some issues. I work full time, my husband works full time. Our 24 hours don't look the same. Mine don't look the same as yours, and they don't look the same as the person sitting next to you. So what might work for me won't work for you. But the one thing I can tell everybody is if you make a plan and look at your week, you figure out what works for you and what's going to work for your family. And how do you then still work on the health goals that you need to? So I always tell people, I said, this is what I do, take it with a grain of salt and fit it to your family, but it'll work. You look at potential hurdles, look at your week and say, okay, who's where? Or am I working late this night? Or are we working screwy shifts? Who's in and out? Look where you know you're gonna get into trouble when it comes to food. And that's where people are like, oh, I'm just gonna go get takeout. Where I live, there's not great takeout, okay? So we have better luck just figuring it out at home. Cause then I'm gonna stand there and be like, I don't want that anyway. So, but look and say, what can we do? And here's the thing, when you're eating and making meals for your family, this doesn't have to be hard. Throw something in a crock pot. I don't really like crock pots because everything tastes the same, but I will make more because I know I'm a pain. So like, how do you make things quick, right? So look at the hurdles, look where you're gonna get into trouble and keep it easy. Like I said, I always plan out our week. What protein are we having tonight? What vegetables? And I'm gonna throw some carbs in. But I know the nights, like last night, I decided to take my kids to the varsity soccer game. My daughter was the ball girl. We haven't been home a little later. We have soccer going on right now. My husband's son raced dirt bikes, so we're gone a lot. But like, we always take food. First of all, these races, listen, there's porta potty, okay? So like, you're choosing good food choices because we're not going in there, okay? But you look and say, how do I make this easy for my family? What kind of things do I enjoy so that we're not getting into takeout, we're not skipping meals, we're having cereal for dinner. And establish a routine. I'm one of the most routine people you'll meet because I have no attention span. So if it's not consistent, we're in trouble. So like I go literally plan my meals on Friday, grocery shop on Saturday, and then Sunday starts the week, right? But that's what works for me. Cause I also know if I go to the grocery store 50 times this week, we have no money. Cause I'll just get in there and find things we don't need. And if anybody has Aldi here, I go down the aisle of goodness. My kids joke around, they're like, are we gonna go down the aisle of things we don't need? Yes. But by having a plan, now you set yourself up. And this is why I tell patients all the time, because they'll be like, well, I'll be like, what'd you have for dinner? Well, Jess, whatever's in the fridge. Okay, well, someone had to put it in the fridge, so which plan to put stuff in the fridge? Now, you don't have to be as planned out as I am. I like it that way, because I don't have to think anymore when I get home. I already know what I'm making. But like then plan to put a bunch of stuff in the fridge that you can grab, right? So like, well, I'm just grabbing it. Okay, but you had to put something in there. So what's in there? And if you're at the mercy of God knows what, then you know what the results we got? God knows what. Okay? So when we're talking about planning, this is why I like to lead it, it's physical activity and exercises. How do we get this in there? This is one of the things I'll get the most pushback from people, is I don't have time. And listen, I'm not arguing with people have time or don't have, everybody's schedule is different. I know I mean, my background's exercise and nutrition. Between them, I have 3 degrees in it. So I've always had an interest in it. After my daughter was born, I did a liver transplant. I gave a part of my liver, these kids steal everything you got from them. I was like, oh God, I gotta get myself back together. It's been a rough year. 2 kids in 2 years with pregnancy, and then she took an organ. I was like, okay, I gotta get back to exercise. And all I could think of was like, the only time in my day now having 2 young kids and her with her own issues, I was like, when the hell am I gonna do this? I'm like, oh God, I gotta get up earlier. And I'm like, I remember saying to my husband, like, I don't know if this is gonna work. And we have a little gym in our house, for me, by the way. That's not my husband's deal. We're not doing that together. That's not, I don't want to bite down. I thought, oh my God, I'm gonna have to get up even earlier. In the first couple months, I was like, this is the worst thing I've ever done. And now it's like, it's literally my time. I treat it like work, right? I love what I do for a living. I don't always want to go there either, okay? But I get up and do it every day. So I get up, and it's great though, because no one needs anything. I'm up before everybody's there. I don't even have to leave the house, but it's become a routine. I found when it works for me. I know that if I do it after, it's never gonna happen after work, actually. I'm just never gonna do it. But I tell people, see how you can find, even if it's smaller pieces of time. Everybody, the first thing everybody says to me when I say, how do we incorporate exercise? I have to get to the gym. Listen, if you wanna go to the gym, by all means, go for it. I don't wanna leave my house to talk to anybody in the morning, okay? I just wanna put the gym in my house. But like, if that's what make you go, go. But also too, how do you find the time to do it? I don't know about you, but the time, so like I literally get up, I go down, put my clothes on, brush my teeth. And that's it. Like I look like hot man, I don't even care. But by the time, like my workouts are anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes. But that time, like where I live, that's how long it would take me just to drive to the gym, unload your stuff, wait for whatever, and then get back. So that's why it works for me, is because it fits in my schedule, it fits in my time, okay? And I've made it consistent. I also too do it first thing in the morning, because it's, you know, I told you I like a schedule. I know I have to be downstairs by a certain time, and then I gotta be upstairs to start packing lunches, and I gotta be out the door. Because then I can't drag it out all day, which is what we're all gonna do. But how do you incorporate the two? Because most people be like, well, Jess, listen, I walk all day at work. And me being blunt, I said, well, okay, is it working? Oh, no, I guess it's not working. I'm okay, then we gotta do something a little different. And that's not to take away from people with physical activity or physical jobs. Honestly, some of them are my hardest because I actually have to feed them more. But I always tell them is that day-to-day activity, stop and go, we actually don't get your heart rate up and sustain it, so we don't get the benefits of exercise. And I'm not talking just weight loss, I'm talking cardiac risk factors, right? So, but what's the difference? So physical activities are things we do day to day, right? I'm up and down, I'm cleaning my house, I'm like on the go, but it's very stop and go, okay? Exercise is keeping that heart rate up and sustaining. And what I tell people too is, we know 30 minutes, 5 times a week, 150 minutes, we know that's always been the standard guideline. But that doesn't mean that's where we have to start. And even if that's not your goal, that's fine too. I tell people, even if you could start at 5 minutes more than what you're doing, 5 minutes a day, that's still 25 minutes this week that you didn't do. Because some people are like, well, is it enough? I'm like, well, listen, 0's not getting us anywhere. So 25 is still gonna be better than 0. And they're like, you know, I never thought about that. And I'm like, it's all how, and it doesn't always have to be perfect. Hey, my house, things like to explode sometimes. Like I said, knock on wood, the daughter is healthy, but she likes to put a bomb in my week. So like, okay, you couldn't go today. That doesn't mean that the whole week's a wash, or things came up, I don't know, the dog threw up, or last week she was talking in her sleep, that was fun. My husband and I were both up, she talked about not sleeping, she started talking in her sleep. I go in, she said, my belly hurts. I'm like, oh, I'm like, are we gonna buy? No, I don't gotta buy. And she's deaf, by the way, too. She has cochlear implants, so at night she can't hear. So yeah, try to talk in the dark is a treat. I'm like, barf. No, I'm not gonna barf. She's like, it just hurts. I'm like, okay, then go back to bed. But I still got up and worked out. But I will be honest with you, I was tired because she one talked in her sleep nonsense earlier, so I was already up, and then stomach ache thought we're gonna barf. So like, did I scale the workout back? Yes. But I could have very easily said, you know what? Today's not the day. It doesn't always have to be perfect. And that's the thing is how you start to do things and stick with them, but it doesn't have to be perfect. Okay. And that's the thing we need to tell patients if anybody's patient facing. How do you meet your patients where they're at? If I come into you and I can barely get down the hallway because I can't breathe with walking, you sitting down and saying, hey, Jessica, you know what? 5 days a week, 30 minutes. You've already lost them. They are never going to engage with you because they literally can't do what you're asking. And to them, if I come in and you ask me to do something I can't do, we're lost. I'll nod my head and tell you, thank you very much. You're never going to engage them to do something. If you can say to them, what can you do right now? And that's always the conversation I have. What do you feel like you can do right now? I think I could do 5 minutes. I'm like, well, let's start there. And they're like, is that enough? Yeah, because it's going to get you further. And then we add a couple minutes, and you'd be surprised how far we get. But they'll also look at you and say, thank you for listening, because now you met me where I'm at. If I can only say to you, I usually tell patients, actually it's my favorite tagline, I say this to 90% of my patients, I'm like, listen, we are gonna negotiate. I'm always gonna get my way, but we're gonna negotiate. So like if they're like, Jess, I think I could do like 2 days a week. I'm like, how about 3? 3's always where I'm gonna push you anyway. So like, I think I could do 3. I'm like, perfect, 3 it is. That's where I was gonna settle anyway. But like now we got them to push themselves a little bit, but they felt like they set their own goals and they felt like they can accomplish their goals. They're gonna come back next time and try to outdo those and try to do more because they knew that we went. And I always, if they'll say to me, I think I could do 30 minutes. And I'm like, how about this? Let's do at least 15 minimum. That's your goal. If you want to go further, you can go further, but let's at least do 15. They're like, oh, okay, that's doable. Most of the time they're going to be able to do more, but the days they can't, they've hit their goal. Now they're going to do more next. So what is your goal? What are you capable of doing? This is the conversation I have all the time. Look at your current issues to address and prioritize them, okay? If all of a sudden you come in with an A1C of 12, we got some things we gotta work on, right? But we can't tackle all of them together. And let's be honest, when people wanna lose weight, especially now, tackle that, because that's my main focus in, my world here, is what pieces can we do? You're not gonna go home and throw everything out of your cupboard. You're not gonna join the gym tomorrow. You're not going to, okay? But what couple things can you work on? Let's set the priority list and we can start there. And that's the long-term and short-term goals. We see patients with significant weight loss that needs to happen, right? That is, I can only imagine how overwhelming that is to look and say 100, 150 pounds. That's a huge goal. Hey, can we get to 25 pounds? Can you start to keep a food journal and eat some protein and veggies? I'll leave you alone a little longer too. And then we can set the long-term goals. But trying to set too many goals, we will lose people every single time. And at the end of the day, I tell people too, it's not just about weight loss, it's how do we actually feel good so you can enjoy your life. Like I don't, even though my background is exercise and I do enjoy it more than most, I don't love it all the time. My only goal right now in my 40s is I want to be able to do what I want to do when I want to do it and still be able to run my kids now. I had to play this, it was Parents vs. Kids U10. I'm pretty proud of this because it actually came back a little better than I thought. And I ran these little kids down. I thought I might die in a couple points, doesn't matter. We're playing an alumni soccer game that my sisters were organizing. I think my mother's just as excited about this. And the girls were playing the varsity girls that we were at. We had to be at least 10 years out. All of us are mostly 20 plus years out of high school. I had this young patient yesterday for sports nutrition. She goes, "You're gonna play us?" She was worried. I'm like, "What are you worried about? Like, I think we might die." Like, and I'm in pretty good shape. Like, I work out. Like, we're gonna be okay. And then my husband's like, "But we're not old." I'm like, "No, if this was an adult league, I'd feel good." But like, John, my husband's name's John. I'm like, "John, they're 16 to 18. He's like, "Yeah, I see here." I'm like, "You're still racing dirt bikes." So like my husband still put himself through a woods at 50 miles now. Okay. He's like, "We're not old." I'm like, "No, but do you want to race?" Our nephew's 15. He's like, "Okay, that's a good point because he's killing me." I'm like, "Okay." So like that's the goals that we look at, not just weight loss. And I tell people all the time, they're like, "Why didn't you get my weight to where I want?" I'm like, "Yeah, but look at you now. You went on vacation, you were able to walk the whole time. You're sitting on the floor with your kids." So it's also looking at help them realize what are their actual goals. We know for a lot of people, weight loss does need to happen. We get that, right? But what are the other goals? And that helps keep people going. Because sometimes better than others. Sometimes we, like I said, we have the option, we put everybody on it, but we use body comp scale. So we know it's not just a total weight, it's where's the weight coming from. But what other things are improving in your day? And those are the things I tell people to focus on. And then remember, small changes add up. When you're looking at risk factors for most metabolic diseases, 5%. So we're not even talking all their excess weight. We're talking 5% weight loss. And that's for diabetes, hypertension, sometimes sleep apnea. Fatty liver is 15%. We do know we need a much higher percentage of fat loss for fatty liver, which right now is exploding, as we all know. And then eliminating that all or nothing attitude, okay? Doesn't matter, this week didn't go good, fine, try again tomorrow. And I always tell people too, no matter how good your plan is, things happen. So if all of a sudden you get home and your dinner plan's exploded, and it's Wednesday, we don't wait again until Monday. Tomorrow's a new day, right? And that's where you're never far off. And that's why I tell people, when you're looking at lifestyle, long-term changes, if you constantly look at each kind of small block by itself, we're never far off. If every time one little thing blows up, you stop for a week, well, yeah, then we're never gonna get anywhere. But it's never gonna be all or nothing. Eating healthy, living healthy, there's a gray zone, right? Like all this stuff on social media where you gotta start, growing your own everything, making your own sourdough bread. I don't have patience for that. There doesn't have to be perfect, right? We cook most of our own meals at my house, so we do eat a lot healthier, cleaner. I hate that word too, but I buy bread. I can make bread. I don't want to. So that's process though, right? So we live in the gray zone. It doesn't have to be you do it all this way or all this way. We live in the middle. Find the things that work for you. Find the ways that you can eat healthier than where we're at. And that's what I talk about all the time. Every little step adds up. Anything you do different and do different consistently puts you in a different spot, right? Because these big leaps, half the time, it's like trying to jump from the big ladder to the big rings on the ladder. You're gonna miss a lot of times. Even if we have to kind of inch up all the time, all of a sudden you realize where we're at. Like when you take weight loss, like I said, that's what I do. But like 1 pound, like I've had patients like 2 pounds a month and they're like, oh my God, all this effort. But they're down 25 pounds this year. But it's hard to see that in the moment. But I'm like, look at all these little things you've done. Even 4 pounds for the month, they're down 50 pounds for the year. That's a huge amount of weight loss. And can you keep it off? Because, oh, by the way you did it, you didn't really know, it wasn't that big of a change from what you're doing. So now, all of a sudden, we're 3 years down the road, we're doing the same things again. I don't know, that's a good for me. So biggest tip, consistency. Like I said, number one goal for reaching goals. What we do all the time dictates what our outcomes are gonna be, right? It'll always beat out all the trends. And that's why where we lose people sometimes, like when I talk about the plate method, the handful method, it isn't fancy. It's not fancy at all, right? It's kind of boring. And that's why I tell people losing weight and being healthier is actually very boring. When you get to that consistency point, like the way I live my life is actually pretty boring. Because there's flexibility, but there's no drama to it. I don't have to worry about, did I have the right things in the house in terms of these meals, or I could still go out and have fun. Like the way we work on being consistent is where we'll win at this. Unfortunately, for sometimes if we take the drama out of it, it's not as exciting. I don't know, I got enough excitement, I'm good with being boring. And then lastly, resources. So where do you find additional resources for yourself, for your patients? Obviously our medical professionals, the one thing I'm always gonna tell, and we have this conversation with our patients, establish a PCP. See where you're eating at. When's the last time you've had an A1C? When's the last time you've had a lipid panel? What are your even goals if we don't know? Okay. And then preventative care. This is just my thing. I'm big on this. Colonoscopies, mammograms. I was raised by a breast surgeon, so trust me. Before I even turned 40, he was already harping on my sister and I. Making sure you're staying on top of those things, because we don't think sometimes when we think of being healthy and all these different things, we forget the simple things that already exist in terms of preventative care, right? They exist. Community resources. And this is something, so part of my job, my million hats I do really have, is how do we tie community members in? So I do all of our community initiatives as well. But is there farmers markets in your area? Is there local health departments? So we sit on the border of New York and Pennsylvania, so we do have Penn State Cooperative Extension and Cornell Cooperative Extension. A lot of times they do different things into the schools. New York State's a little bit more aggressive with that. Cornell does a lot more. But if you're talking for kids, sometimes there's different programmings for the schools. What else is in the community? And a lot of times people just don't talk to each other and stakeholders don't know what's in their community. So interestingly enough, tomorrow I'm on a panel for AMG, American Medical Group Association, for one of their quick projects for obesity. And I've done a collaborative with them a couple times. And I'm talking to how do you tie your community members in? Most of the time there's more resources out there, but we don't know they exist. And these are for providers, if you're in an organization who bring together a meeting and say, okay, what do you know is out there? What do you know is out there? Because most of the time people just don't know. And we've done handouts that just go right in their electronic health record that, hey, depending on regions, we have several regions, here's what's available in the community. So you don't have to spend the time to find it for the patients because it's really already there. Local gyms and clubs, like I said, find what interests you. YMCA, a lot of the YMCA also do DPP, diabetes prevention programs. Those would be a good resource if you have patients who would benefit from them. They also do a lot of stuff with kids around healthy eating and movement. So those exist, and they usually run a lot of programming, and there'll be like cycles throughout the year. So see what's available. You know, I went to school down here. Obviously, I lived almost a good decade down here. Lots of local parks and trails, like even where I live. There's also been a lot of initiatives. If you're not into it, you may not know, but there's been a lot of initiatives to start to make more trails in these regions. So if that's something, finding clubs, how do you get your patients or even ourselves out there and move? Pickleball, super random, has been the amount of people that we've had getting into pickleball. Yeah, actually, it's funny. I was home working today. There's like a park down the road from my house. And there's these women that have been doing it all summer. They come, they set up, it's super fun to watch. But there's all these things that have started. So see what's in your community for things you might like. Like I said, I put a gym in my house because I have my own plan, my own thought process. But find the things that you enjoy. That's what gets people moving. And also too, for patients, if anybody, like I said, if ever seeing patients, how do you get them out to the community? How do you help them, or at least point them in a direction of, hey, there's some stuff in the community, find what might interest you. And I always tell patients of mine, if you don't know what you might like if you don't try it. And then there's tons of online resources. If you told me when I was in school that there'd be all this online programming like workouts, I would have laughed at you. YouTube has tons of free workouts and free. So I give a ton of patients this. There's seated workouts. So like when you come to me, I got something. There's never something someone comes to me that I can't find something to give you, by the way. You know, we have a lot of joint issues, waiting for knee replacements, hip replacements, etc. Seated workouts, I would have 20 years ago, when I was in school, I'd been like, see, what are you gonna do? You can get your heart rate up. You'd be surprised. There is so much out there, and a lot of it's actually free for our patients, and they can do it right from home. So really, like I said, people, oh God, they cringe. That's a joke at when patients come to see me, they're like, Jessica's gonna find something. So like every excuse you give me, I got something for you. But they do exist. So figure out what's in your area, figure out even, like I said, what's nationally online, because our patients can benefit from it. And you don't have to have that conversation with each and every single patient. Can you put it in your electronic health record? Hey, I'd like you to start exercising. Here's a bunch of research, and it prints out right for you. You don't even have to have a conversation. And then my takeaway points: eat balanced meals. The more we can get people to increase veggies, increase protein. Obviously, yes, within a region, within reason. But I'll be honest, most aren't overeating protein at BC, and we see thousands of patients a year. It's how big our practice is. But getting them to balance their meals. How can we get some carbs but a little bit less and balance the protein? And honestly, if we can get increased fruits and veggies, we're already winning. If it, like Dr. Morrison always tells us, if you can get them to come eat something off a tree or came out of the ground, we're gonna do all. Move more, right? We all, especially, we were joking around about like Zoom, because there's a lot of people on Zoom, but like all of our meetings now are sitting. We have started sitting even more than what we used to. I do have a standing desk in my office, and I pace. I don't sit real well if anybody didn't catch on. But how do you kind of get up and try to move more throughout the day? We know we still need exercise, but how do we just get up and start moving more? We're stuck at these desks, we're stuck sitting a lot. How do we incorporate that? We didn't talk about it, but it's one of my takeaway points. How do we work on dropping sugary beverages? Okay, you know, the Dunkin' Donuts drinks, the Starbucks, just any of them. How do we try to at least cut back sugary beverages? Work on stress and sleep. Okay, this is always my takeaways. Those aren't easy, but stress, we know on the body, when everybody comes in to have cortisol check, it's gonna be high if you're stressed. Okay, we know that, that's just how it works. How do we work on those? I don't necessarily have the best tips all the time for that, but how do you start to establish those? But my last thing and my most important thing, consistency over perfection, and that's what we wanna work on with our patients. It's not necessarily, did you always hit your goals? Are we improving and are we hitting them more than we used to? Because they will feel like they're winning, and if we can tell them, all I'm asking is for you to be more consistently hitting your targets versus all the time, then we've done something. And we won, by the way, with it. Questions?
If you don't mind, I'm going to start us off with one.
Yeah.
Okay. So as we get older,
Yep.
you know, muscle loss is a real thing.
Go ahead.
Is there something older people, and I'm talking people over 60, should be doing to maintain that muscle?
Weight bearing exercise and protein. Here's why, so we know at basically every decade, we start to lose more, but do you know why we start to lose more in every decade of life too? We stop moving as much, right? So, like I said, I'm in my 40s. I have younger children. I'm still on the go all the time. I watch my parents, who are my parents, so do the math, they're late 60s, early 70s. They don't move as much, right? There's not young kids that like I don't know about anybody, I don't get to sit in the house. Every time my butt touches the chair, right? So we're as we start aging, we naturally aren't moving as much. So what are we doing? We're not using that muscle. It's breaking down. We're not nearly as active. So if we, and this is why I'm big on strength training, if we incorporate strength training, weight bearing exercise like walking, things like that, we preserve the muscle across the age groups. It's also why it's so important for women in perimenopause and menopause. All of a sudden, there's no all of a sudden age and your muscle just drops. It's all these factors take in. We know that if we do a lot more strength training, keep your muscle up, we keep your metabolic rate higher too. So that's where we can win in getting enough protein. Unfortunately, as people get older, they stop moving, so muscle breaks down. But also too, when you're not as active, we're not as hungry. So you'll see when people come in, they stopped eating and they're just having these little meals. But what are they getting? Most are still not getting enough protein. So all of a sudden they'll come in, they're like, I had a piece of toast with my coffee. It's like, oh, okay. So you've also had no protein, we've had no movement, the muscle loss. So it's really movement, weight bearing activity, and adequate nutrition.
Thank you.
I have a question. If you prefer plant-based diet, what are ways to get in protein other than eating a boiled piece of chicken breast?
The plant-based does get a little tricky for us because plant-based, you really have to be making sure we're doing complementary proteins too, right? Because no plant-based is a complete protein. So really making sure, are you balancing? It's usually fruits, veggies, nuts, and those kind of things, soy, like really trying to look at what do you take in and making sure we're balancing. The tricky part with most plant-based, depending on other health diseases, is their carb intake a lot of times going to be very high. So it does make it a little tricky, but it's looking at what, like, if we're more, and I try to say, I like more plant-based in terms of getting people to eat a lot more veggies with their protein. But if you're just trying to get your protein sources there, you have to be very cognizant that are we getting all those amino acids that we need? It's a little tricky, but it's really different nuts and seeds, incorporating a lot more veggies, those whole grains that have a little bit more like quinoa and things like that, and really making sure we're balancing those. It's a little tricky with some of the other diseases to balance it though.
Okay, so we're at medical school.
Mhm.
If you had a magic wand
Mhm.
and because the students don't get a lot of nutrition, what would be the one thing, or maybe more than one, that you would like for students to learn regarding nutrition? Because I know that when I have been to accompany patients or be patients and they're talking about nutrition, what the physician said is very different than what the nutrition instructor says. And sometimes there's mixed messages. So if there was a few things that you could change with a magic wand about nutrition education in medical school, what would that be?
Mindfully. And let me tell you what, no matter which specialty you have, obviously radiology, they're not touching us. Any specialty you have, if you can give them that 10-second of, can we get a little bit of protein on your plate? Can we get some veggies and can we balance the carbs? Because you look at like orthopedics, right? And here's the thing, I won't go down a rabbit hole. If you look at like orthopedics, right? We're dealing with broken bones, we're dealing with bone surgery. What do you need to heal that? Protein. And it can be a very simple conversation.
Mhm.
Hey, make sure while you're getting your meals, I want you to have some source of protein at all of your meals. You don't have to give them exact recommendations, but can you make sure you're getting enough protein? Or even too, if you know like they're struggling, hey, can you have one of the protein shakes that are available and make sure you're getting at least 1 or 2 of those a day? There we go. If you've had, you're in the ER, we've had burns, someone says, what do I do? Once again, protein and good nutrition. We know, and it doesn't have to be fancy, but it literally hits. Like we deal, we're obesity medicine, it's a lot of family medicine, internal medicine, right? We're talking about diabetes, hypertension, fatty liver, all those things. That 2-second conversation of get some protein on your plate, a little bit smaller of a carb and some veggies, we will hit 90% of what you're gonna need to cover.
You may have touched on this, but just to go back to it again, what is like the bare minimum protein that you want someone to get in a day? And how different is that for men and women?
So men and women, so it's actually the same. So we do have weight dependent. So I'll give you kind of like 2 different scenarios. Most people really, to give like a flat example for most adults that come in our clinic, anywhere from 20 to 45 grams of protein. More closer to 45 for men. I don't like 20 for anything other than some of our surgery patients who can't take it enough, but just to give you recommendations in the back of your head to obviously not memorize them, 0.8 grams per kilo of body weight is like the bare bones. bare bones, and even our patients who have chronic kidney disease, we're still putting them there, that's very, very low, okay? When you look at weight loss, weight maintenance, the national recommendations, especially from Obesity Medicine Association, they follow 1.5 to 1.8 grams. 2 is what I use for athletes and people who need to build muscle or in a deficit, and then 2.2 is like your burn victims. So it's more than what most people realize. Now, here's the tricky part, and this is where it gets a little bit not that easy, is you have to look at excess adiposity. So if you're 100 pounds overweight, I'm putting them closer to 1 to 1.2 because I don't want to feed the excess body fat. So there's where the tweaking kind of comes in a little bit, because if you have only 25 pounds of excess body fat, 1.5 to 1.8, great. 100, 150 pounds, we're going to scale. And that's where you kind of look at that range and say, what does the person in front of me look like? And what am I trying to make sure I'm feeding? But when you look at that, even if you just take the 1.5 kind of middle of the road, you recognize most people are not getting nearly enough protein. And what we try to do is, I try to always tell them I like at least 3 meals a day. And you don't have to do this like it used to be, I'd write the whole scheme of stuff. 3 meals, 3 snacks. I personally, I'm a big, if you get at least 3 meals a day, we're getting the doses that we need, because you want it pretty consistent throughout the day. So just for sake of easy numbers, if you need 100 grams of protein a day, what I don't want is someone who comes in and says, well, I had 5 for breakfast, 20 for lunch, like 75 for dinner. Because then the dosing is off. Even though for the day they got what they need, the body's not utilizing it. I treat it like a medication. I tell patients, I'm like, if you came in and had this big rash all over your arm, and I said, listen, 3 days a week or 3 times a day, you take this capsule and I want it on. If you come in and give me a little, and then glob it on, it's gonna work, but it won't work as well. So that's how we structure nutrition as well. But the protein, most people are under eating it. And that is really what we're seeing. Like I said, even though you have all this protein and all these products, most of the time when people are coming in, especially women, are drastically under eating what they're supposed to get.
Protein shakes are nasty.
I like some, I'm weird, so I don't like most protein bars. I think they're disgusting. I can drink just about any kind of protein shake. Not the soy, I can't do the soy stuff, and I definitely I can't do the plant-based ones like the pea pro. Oh god, they're thick. I can do any of the way though.
I don't drink. That's awesome.
When I don't eat, so here's the thing, like I can drink a protein shake, like I drink one before I walk in, because I'm not having dinner till like, but like I could drink a protein shake while I'm making dinner and still eat. And that's the thing we tell people is eat drinking your food. That's why I don't like in the beginning when we talked about like Herbalife and like the Optifast and those kind of things, is people aren't satiated, right? Now, we use it a couple different ways though too, because we do bariatric surgery, the GLP. So sometimes when people's appetite's so reduced, we use the shakes because we just can't get what we need in them. Or if people are really sick, like after surgery, we need a little bit more, we utilize them. But they gotta eat it.
All right, so I'm going to be very transparent, right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to like eat better stuff. I find sometimes there's weeks that I can eat the world, like no matter what. And I'm eating the yogurt, I'm having fruit in the morning, and then I'm like, I have a granola bar, an hour later, and I'm like,
It's the carbs by themselves. So depending on what yogurt you're having, right? So like take Greek yogurt, right? Because everybody's like, well, I'm eating Greek. There's a big vast difference. So like if you take like the Walmart brand, right? Because people go to Walmart and they get the Great Value protein or Greek yogurt. Just get the vanilla, right? There's about 16, 17 grams of carbs and about 13 grams of protein. So your carbs are not higher than your protein. We went and added fruit, even though fruit's good for us, right? But now we added more carbs, no protein. So now it's not just totals, it's the ratio between the two. So even though the food choices were good, carbs are higher than protein, you're gonna stimulate your appetite. Because remember, we brought your blood sugars up, now they're gonna dip, now you're hungry. We bring your blood sugars up, we bring insulin up, insulin's a fat storing hormone, we're gonna make you hungry. So if we start the day with more carbs than we did protein, we are off to the races. And then you brought up a great point, granola bars. So you're looking at the highest granola bar might have 10 grams of protein, so about 30 to 40 grams of carbs. Remember, every 4 grams of carbs is a teaspoon of sugar. So now we had more carbs. Even though we had some protein at each meal, the carbs, the ratio is off. So if you look at like a different yogurt, like Oikos Pro is one of the ones I always pump out. 3/4 of a cup is 23 grams of protein. I'll do a full cup of that, so I get 30 grams of protein. I'll do 1 cup of berries, which is about 6 grams of fiber for the 20 grams of carbs. So now I'm sitting at 30 grams of protein, and I got 20 grams of carbs, right? And then I'll do a grain-free granola. So there's some fat, only about 4 net carbs, and about 4 grams of protein. So I'm not getting a ton of protein. But now all of a sudden I've had protein, I've had carbs, and I've had fat. So now my appetite is controlled across the way. So it's that balancing act of, yes, we get protein, but how much protein are we getting in relation to the carbs? And if the carbs are consistently higher than the protein, you are going to be hungry.
Okay.
Yep, think always, even if we're doing snacks, always that if you can at least get them balanced roughly, you will feel better.
Yeah, and I think it's for me, you know, coming from a Hispanic family, I'm gonna be honest, like growing up, we didn't really, we had like a plate of rice and some, you know, and a little bit of meat.
Yep.
And I don't remember really having like a lot of vegetables or having salads. Like that was not something that we did.
And that's why I say, like, how we were culturally brought up, right? Like, depending on how much veggies. So the good news is you can take the things that you're used to, right? The rice, the beans, how now you can say, okay, can I increase the meat serving that we're gonna have? Can I still have the rice and the things I enjoy, but now all of a sudden, can that volume shrink? Can the protein come up? And now we know, okay, you know, I gotta start eating more veggies. What are some other things I wanna throw in there? And then you can throw, so now the meal looks similar to what we had, but now the balance of it's different. And now I always tell people too, when you have the ability, like I love to cook, so I just love to cook. But you can still make that food taste good. So like if I'm doing pasta and I'm doing pestos and stuff like that, I'm still adding all that. But I know now I need more veggies than I do pasta. I can still have it, but I also need more protein. So you look at things that you traditionally are eating and how do you change it? And even like you were saying now, like we know, okay, everybody's on a yogurt kit, which I love yogurt, by the way. But which yogurts are we doing? Because now all of a sudden the devil's in the detail. It's not, and like I said, we're kind of targeted because everything's like, oh, it's protein mix. Actually look and see. So like there's sometimes like protein granola bars. It was like, we get this all the time. People are like, oh, it's protein granola bar. And I'm like, because it said protein across the top, like they were targeted and it's 5 grams of protein. 5 grams of protein does not really excite me, to be honest with you. So it's like, okay, what other options are out there that are better? And it doesn't, we don't have to just see how much protein we can eat, but how do we balance the products and things that we're using?
And
That ratio.
I'm gonna be honest, again, I like to be honest, but I think sometimes I'm not hungry. I'm just so used to like if I'm having a hard day or if I'm like, I need a break, like that's kind of like my mental, you know,
Just stressing that and then not eating.
no, what do you mean? Like if I'm stressed or I feel bored or I feel like I want to eat something,
Mhm.
you know what I mean?
But there you guys start to identify. So like what I always tell people is like, if all of a sudden now we're eating because of, what's the because of? And you start to look at that, like, okay, I've had a bad day. What are other ways we can fix that? Eating's a hobby, right? So like, what could we find ourselves doing instead of eating, right? We know we need to eat. And the other thing though too, how are you eating and are you eating consistently enough throughout the day? Because that also helps control appetite. Where people get in trouble is if we've under-eaten or we're being restrictive and now all of a sudden it's 5 o'clock at night, we're kind of tired, it's been a day. Now we've set ourselves up, not only are we stressed, we're hungry, right? So now we're putting ourselves in a position to not make as good of choices because we're a little hungry, we've under-eaten today. Now we're stressed. So you start to look at how do you eat better throughout the day so we can better control that. So that we know that, like I know, like I said, I'm very structured with how I eat. I know if all of a sudden it's 5 o'clock and I'm hungry, I probably am hungry. But like if all of a sudden it's a weird time of day and I'm like, I'm starving, why? Is it because I just want to eat? Is it because it's there? Or is there a because of? And you start, and like I said, that's where that consistent structure, so you can work on the identifying where are we getting into issues. And that's why I always said, look at your hurdles. Where are we getting in trouble? Like, there's a lot of times people, you know, they're like, well, I'm hungry at 5 o'clock. Okay, like myself, I eat at noon, at lunch. I usually have something to eat about 4:30 because we're eating dinner until 6:30, 7 o'clock. There's nothing wrong with that. So, or when people are like, well, I'm hungry after dinner. Well, you didn't have breakfast, you had a smidge of lunch and you had dinner, but the reason you're hungry later is because we've under-eaten all throughout the day. So it all goes into the timing of things and the balance of the nutrition that we're taking in and looking at why are we XYZ. Well, thank you guys.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
That was really good.